What's up, guys? It's Jeff here, back for another week of DFS golf. This week is the PGA Championship, which is kind of bittersweet because majors are always a ton of fun, but it's the last major until next April. Of course, we've got the Tour Championship, and there's plenty of smaller tournaments every week. There's a tournament every week basically, and the Ryder Cup's coming up. So I'm not saying, there's nothing until April, but this is the last really, really big one in our sport until then. So let's just jump right into it. Before I get to the PGA Championship itself, I'm just going to take a second and reflect back on the WGC. Hold myself kind of accountable and figure out what worked and what didn't work. I think that's pretty valuable skill in being a good DFS player, not just golf, any daily fantasy. You don't want to be too results oriented because there's a lot of week to week variance. So I'm not saying you should, change your baseline strategy week to week based on the results, but following trends and seeing where people are at, who people like, who people don't like, this is stuff that matters and stuff that's going to matter when we're building our lineups for this upcoming week. I think my biggest hit, at least in terms of elite values, I actually think I did really well with the elite value guys. I had one big miss, but my two biggest hits, I think, were knowing that Tiger's price was ridiculous. I don't even think in the first video I made I mentioned that his ownership, I don't think I mentioned his ownership because it didn't occur to me that it would be high. I just figured everyone would look at that price, and despite how much most golf fans seem to love Tiger, just, root for him outside of DraftKings. But he was 22% owned, which at 10,800, third in that field is ridiculous. He was 2,000 more than Justin Thomas. And, I said so last week, and I ended up being right. He had a good first 2 days, so maybe I got a little lucky with my prediction. Definitely wasn't looking super great because Dustin was struggling and Jordan was being the Jordan of late, and really only Rory and Ricky. Ricky was around where Tiger was at, and really only Rory was ahead of him. But he did not have a good weekend, and he ended up being probably the least valuable of the elite values besides Jordan. And another hit of mine was definitely pointing out that Dustin, this was probably the week to roster Dustin. Because, and I said at the time, that because of the elite field that this tournament has and all the other possibilities around him, including Tiger, this is probably the lowest owned you're going to get Dustin. And he's coming off a win, and the course set up well for him. Again, I could have gotten a little lucky with the result, but I stand by, what drove me to that conclusion. He was only 15% owned. So when I saw that, I regretted not going him more, to be honest, because you're not going to see Dustin as low as 15% in many fields. You're just not. And then I said the same thing about Rory. I said Rory might get lost in the shuffle. And he was only 11% owned. He was the second lowest owned of the group. And behind Jordan, who I would consider him my biggest miss because he was just awful. And ownership doesn't matter if a guy isn't playing well. And that's the trick in this game, is weighing those two things. And I talked about it last week, and I'll probably say it a lot, but you can't go alone guy just to go alone guy. You need your guys to score points. So while I do think, you can't just say, oh, Jordan was always going to play bad, because he wasn't. It's Jordan Spieth. I don't think it's all. At the same time, I don't think it's really fair to just say, well, we got Jordan at 9%, so it's a win no matter what he does, because he hasn't played well in a really long time. He hasn't won this year, and you need a guy who's you're paying that much for to win. You need him to win a decent amount of the time, and he he was awful. Um, just terrible. So I would consider that my biggest miss. And Dustin and Rory at low ownerships at a course that fit their eye very well. Um, I think they were my hits. And then just going to the mid tier, really just gonna focus on Justin versus Brooks because I loved Brooks specifically because of the existence of Justin Thomas and his price. Um, Justin's price was 8,800. It was a joke, and I thought his ownership was going to be insane. I was wrong about that. He was only 26% owned in the biggest GPPs. Um, and that just wasn't high enough at his price. And if you had told me before the tournament started that he was only going to be 40% owned, or excuse me, 26% owned, I probably would have gone with him. I would have gone all in on him. But I didn't know that, and that's why I thought that Brooks at 8,900 was such good value because I think Brooks was close enough to Justin's ceiling while cutting the ownership at such a cost, or excuse me, cutting the ownership so much that he was just going to give your team incredible uniqueness and incredible value. He was still owned, he was only 11%, and he did play well. So I don't think I was really super wrong about that. Obviously, Justin won. So I was wrong that Brooks would end up being more valuable than Justin, but I still like the thought process, and I think that kind of thinking will really help you going forward in DFS. And I don't even know if Justin was the most valuable player in DraftKings last week. I'd have to imagine Kyle Stanley at 3% would have given your team. You needed Justin to win, but you probably needed Kyle Stanley too. Like, if there was a world where you had a team that didn't have one of them, it probably would have been easier to win without Justin than without Kyle Stanley, maybe. Just given he was only 3%, there's a lot more unique sets. I don't think that wording was entirely correct, but because you definitely needed Justin to win, so just sort of ignore the rambling I just said. But I do think that Kyle Stanley at 3% was probably the more valuable DraftKings player last week. With that being said, I mean Justin at 26%, like I said, that's a dream at that price. And yeah, so that about sums up the WGC for me. That was a really fun event to watch until Justin really started running away with it. But it's a really nice lead into the PGA Tour where I can load up on Griot again and have my heart broken again because he's a disaster. PGA Championship being played at Bellerive Country Club. It is a par 70 that's going to fall somewhere between 73 and 7,400 yards, depending on the day where the tees are. What do we think of this course, and how do we really start to build a strategy for building rosters this week? Well, the first thing you got to do, like I said last week, is you have to look at the course, and not just the distance, not just the par. I mean, those things matter. It matters that it's a long par 70 with only 2 par 5s. That is very important because off the bat, you want to look at guys who score on par 4s. You want to look at guys who, aren't super short. And that can get you started. But to really narrow down what kind of player you're going to want, you got to look a little bit more in depth. So after doing a little bit more research, you find that the rough is thick like it was last week. So distance isn't going to be the only thing because if you're in the rough, you're in trouble. And another reason you're in trouble is because even though these greens are big, there's bunkers everywhere. Like everywhere on this course. So you'll notice that I included sand save percentage as one of my stats this week. I think that's just I think sand save, I mean, you you obviously don't want to be in the bunkers, but I don't know how avoidable that's going to be this week. So you want guys who can get out of trouble when they are in it, because everyone's going to be in it this week. So those are the guys you really, really, really want to look for. As far as what kind of course it is, it's got bent grass greens, and it plays very similar to East Lake, which is where the Tour Championship is played and has been played the last 3 years. Xander Schauffele won last year, Rory won 2 years ago, and Jordan won 3 years ago. We had that, crazy back nine of putting playing with Henrik Stenson. So that's where basically I came up with these stats, and that's how I built my formula, which is right here, which I will get to in a minute. But I really think that strokes gained off the tee, strokes gained approach, all the ball striking stuff is always going to matter. So you should pretty much always factor that stuff in. I weighted them kind of differently. I added a little bit more weight to approach and off the tee. And then I added birdie or better. I always give that good weight because it's DraftKings. You have to make birdies. And I included bogey avoidance and scrambling, but I weighted sand saves a little bit higher than both, and I weighted these two a little bit less. And then I weighted accuracy and distance the same. I think that distance is going to matter a little bit more. You can't just not hit it far all, and the fairways aren't going to run out a ton. There is some elevation, so that's helpful to shorter hitters. But for the most part, distance is still going to give you somewhat of an advantage. But at the same time, like I just said, the rough is deep and there's bunkers everywhere. So if you're in trouble a lot off the tee, that's going to be trouble. As far as building your team, I think it's just the same as it always is. I think you got to factor in potential ownership and how you project these guys. So we're going to start with the elite tier, which I will call, we will do Tiger to Dustin. And we'll just do the top 4 5-figure salaries. And same thing as last week. I think this is just a Dustin Rory. If you're going to pay up, pay up. Jordan's form is awful. You couldn't convince me to touch him. He's 117th in the world in driving accuracy this year, and despite that, he hits it the shortest of the big 4. He's just, and he can't putt. He can't putt this year, at least. He makes, he does make a lot of birdies. He's the worst out of the bunkers of the big 4. And I just don't, I don't think his ownership's going to be high. And if you're a big Spieth fan, and that is the argument I would make, is he will probably be the lowest owned of the big 4, especially with Tiger so close to the top, because Tiger is always high owned. And Ricky, everyone loves Ricky, and he's the cheapest of the 5-figure guys. I do like Ricky this week. I'm probably not going to roster him very much because, like I said, I think if you're gonna pay up, you should pay up. Dustin is just Dustin. I don't know how much I can say about him that will surprise people. He's just amazing at everything, including he's 59th in sand saves. It's not awful. But Rory is 22nd, and Rory is number 1 in driving distance. I think you're going to get Rory at quite a discount ownership-wise, and I think Rory is going to be my favorite play of the elite values, Rory or Dustin. And then I would go Ricky, and then I would put Spieth in last. Going to the next tier of Tiger through Day, the 9,000s. And I still think these are part of the elites because it's really hard to go like, Dustin and Tiger, obviously. You can definitely do something like Dustin Day, but even then you're working at quite a discount. I think popularity-wise, Justin and Tiger and Rose will be the three most popular. Maybe Molinari and Fleetwood too. But I mean, look at that. You got Molinari, Fleetwood, Rose, Justin, Tiger, and then just sitting there is Brooks Koepka. And Brooks is Brooks Koepka. He's a two-time major winner. He hits it a mile. If he can just get the putter rolling, which he couldn't last week. There was a stretch where he missed 8 putts inside 16 feet for birdie in 24 holes. That's just so crazy. He is really good, and you're gonna get him probably at the least owned. So I think I'd recommend going Brooks if you were looking for a sort of contrarian play with a close to his high ceiling. Justin is really hot and he's coming off a win, and he's still really cheap. I think his ownership's going to be really high. Another really interesting play is Justin Rose. Rose is coming off an injury. He withdrew from Bridgestone. And so I'm going to say the same thing about Justin Rose that I said about Dustin for kind of different reasons. Rose has played 18 tournaments this year. He's made all 18 cuts, and 13 times he's been in the top 10. He has had an unbelievable season. He's a great bunker player, great ball striker. And if this were any other week, like it has been all season, he would be the highest owned player on the slate because he just always is. Everybody loves Justin Rose. And he still could be this week, but there's some chance that the injury combined with Fleetwood and Molinari being right below him and Justin Thomas and Tiger being right above him, that causes a small, if not meaningful, dip in his ownership. And if that happens, I think you take a chance on a guy who can definitely win here and is arguably, if guaranteed healthy, been the most consistent player in the world this year. I think you can make an argument that this is as low as an ownership as you're going to get for Justin Rose. Now, of course, my thoughts could not be unique, and everybody could be thinking that, and he could end up being the highest player on the slate again. But I don't think that's going to be the case. So if you want to start your team with, Brooks and Rose or Justin and Rose, that's definitely an interesting place to start if you didn't want to pay up for Dustin or Roy or Spieth or Fowler. I also like Day. His driving accuracy scares me, but he is an unbelievable bunker player. He's just the type of guy who's going to get out of trouble if he's in it. He's the best putter in the world. He's second in sand saves. He's 8th in birdie or better, 7th in scrambling, 30th in bogey avoidance. This is just the type of guy. He's 6th in par 4 scoring, tied for 6th. This is just the type of guy who should play very, very well here. If he just doesn't kill himself off the tee, I really, really like Day here. And I think this is a place he can win. All right, going down to the next set of guys. Matsuyama almost came through for me last week in a sense of being a low-owned guy that you just roll with because he has a high ceiling and you're going to get him at a low ownership. He still didn't do that great, but not a huge fan of Reed because you can get Day for $100 cheaper, and Reed is just, we know he won the Masters and we know he had that big Sunday at the US Open, but he just really hasn't been that great statistically all year. He's a good scrambler, so that's nice, and he approaches the green really well, so that is good too. He makes birdies, and he's decent out of the bunker. I'm kind of talking myself into him right now, but I just think his driving is so bad, and that's going to be important this week. The rough is brutal, as I said, and I think that there's better options in the 8K tier. Specifically, I like Cantlay, and I like Phil. And I love Paul Casey. Now, I'm probably the 1,000th person to post a video on the internet today saying they love Paul Casey, but this price is just outrageous. He's going to be the highest owned guy this week. And for good reason. 8,000 is just not enough for him. It's just not close to enough for him. He does everything well. And he has 3 top 5s in the last 3 years at the Tour Championship, if I recall correctly. Which, like I said earlier, Eastlake plays very much like Bellerive, which should make me like Xander. But the combination of his awfulness last week and his price, like, it makes no sense to me that he was 7,900 last week, and then more people are in the field this week, and he went up 300. I don't understand that. But if you buy his success at the Tour Championship last year, he's someone you could go with at 8,200, especially if you're not big on Phil or you think Phil's going to be too high owned. Phil is just a PGA Championship guy. I know that's weird, and that's probably not even a thing. Well, I actually do believe it's a thing, but it sounds stupid. But you need a guy at the PGA Championship who can... The winning score is typically the highest of the 4 majors. So you need a guy who can make birdies and win tournaments where the scores are high, despite tougher conditions. And Phil is just that guy to me. For 8,300, I mean, I know he's a little older, and I know he had a sort of down week last week, but I think at 8,300, Phil is a guy you're going to want to roster. Which brings us down to the sub 8 tier, 7 to 8. And a couple interesting options that stick out to me. Webb Simpson at 7,700. He is basically... Him and Jason Day have been so similar this year. They're just both so awful off the tee. And it makes no sense that Webb is so bad off the tee because he doesn't even hit it far. How do you become a pro golfer and not hit it far or accurate? Obviously, it makes sense because his short game is so outrageous, but that is just so rare. But if he can get that driver right, man, he is good at everything else. 19th in approach, 12th in par 4 scoring, 1st in scrambling, 7th bogey avoidance, 6th putting. Doesn't make too many birdies. That's obviously, he's going to be one of those guys that's very reliant on his finishing position to score you points unless he gets hot with the putter like he did at the Players. But he is one of the few guys that I look at in this tier and think he can contend in this tournament. Leishman had another nice week. He's not very accurate off the tee, which scares me, but I do think he's one of the more underrated players on tour, which says to me that he's someone who in a tough field can compete. I think you want that. Shambo is another guy who, when I sort by the value stat at the end, he'll be up there. But the one thing I want to warn you about DeChambeau is he really hasn't proven that he can beat tough fields. He's won once. He won the Memorial, which was a pretty tough field, but he really seems to be one of those guys, like Gregorio, who compiles his stats at softer courses versus softer fields. And look, I'm going to go with the guy because I try to be as objective as possible. But I just think it's worth noting that he has to prove that he can carry his skill over to the big events on the tough courses before you really, really get fall in love with his, stats and what he's done this year, because across the board he's been great. But like Brendan Grace, if you ask me who can win or who you can see in contention on Sunday, there's so many guys around here that I would say have a better chance. And so that scares me a little bit about DeChambeau. Scrolling down, we've got Neiman at 7,600. I saw Pat Mayo post somewhere yesterday that not even price adjusted, Neiman was like top 5 chance to win this tournament, which, I mean, you just have to roster that. PGA doesn't have his stats, but he drives the ball tremendously. His short game is great. He's just an all-around great player, and maybe his first major, maybe that is scary, but maybe he could just be Sergio, 19-year-old Sergio, for his first major too. You never know. And at 7,600, you're looking for volatility, because there's not going to be a ton of value this week in having 6 guys make the cut. Let me rephrase, because obviously there's value in having 6 guys make the cut, but it's going to be easier this week than most majors because of the amount of former champions in the field and the soft bottom of the field. I think you're going to see more teams with 6 guys make the cut, or at least it's going to be a little bit easier. So with that in mind, you definitely are trying to make your team stand out even more than you usually are of the 6 of 6 teams. And I think Neiman is the type of guy who can contend and can be in there on the weekend. Ben On, same thing as last week. His stats are just, I mean, he's not very accurate, but his ball striking is great. He lost 10 strokes putting last week, which is ridiculous. I mean, I don't even know how that's possible. I follow, they don't ever, show those guys on TV, but you follow his his play-by-play when you're sweating him, and it's like, oh, he missed a 5-footer, and just over and over again until I don't even know. It's just very frustrating. Getting down here, Ryan Moore at 7,400 is another name that I love this week. He's 3rd in accuracy. His ball striking tee to green, besides specifically how far he hits it off the tee, is just great. He's not a good putter, which is why he doesn't make a lot of birdies, but he's a very good scrambler, bunker player. He scores on par 4s, great at approach. He's just really, really good and set up for this course very nicely. And he has a second. He made the playoff again. Him and Kevin Chappell were in a playoff against Rory at Eastlake 2 years ago when Rory won the Tour Championship. So obviously that's one tournament, but you combine that with how good he is, how accurate he is when he hits the ball. If he can just make some putts, he's a guy that he's not going to win. Ryan Moore's not going to be your PGA champion, but at 7,400, I like his price. Chesson Hadley sort of reminds me of DeChambeau, a worse DeChambeau, but he is going to rate out really well when all of this is put together, because he's just, he's 4th in approach, 34th tee to green, 23rd in putting, so a guy who hits it that well and putts that well, he's going to rate out. But he hasn't done it against an elite field, and that is a red flag to me in one of the toughest fields of the year. So, yeah, I mean, Hadley potentially has a high ceiling, but there is, his floor is guy who right now can't have his skills translate in a tougher tournament at a tougher course. So we scroll down. Always gonna love Luke List. Um, and Stanley again. Jesus. Um, Stanley again is really well set up for this course. Pretty much any tough, like Stanley is like the opposite of Chesson Hadley, especially when especially when it comes to the putter. Because good lord, I mean, he could have won the tournament if he could just make all of his 3-footers last week. But Stanley has proven that he can compete at these tough courses, and given what he does, 17th in par four scoring, he's 4th in accuracy. He hits the ball really well. His putting isn't great, and his scrambling is not great. So you want to be a little weary of that. I'm not saying go him 100%. I do like Stanley and List at 7,100. I tried to do this without looking at the formula too much, so I wasn't biased. But I know that Woodland is going to come out fairly well. I don't know how JB Holmes came out, but I do like him because of his driving at this course. He's just a really, really good ball striker. And he makes birdies. And that is formula to success here. So I would definitely roster him before I rostered Jason Duffner, I guess. I mean, I know Duffner has proven he can compete in these fields, but Duffner's just so lame. What analysis by me. But I don't know. I think I'd go Holmes. I think Holmes' game rates out and translates better to this course if I was looking for someone at 7,000. And Woodland is, Woodland has won this year. I think it was this year, right? Yeah, when he beat Ches in that playoff. And, he hits it amazing. He's pretty accurate. 85th if you look at guys around him, especially for a guy who hits it 8th furthest in the world on average. He hits it really well. It's just a short game. So he's a guy who has a high ceiling if he can just run good with the putter this week. There was a couple more names sub 7,000 that I liked, and they're gonna be the last guys I did. Wise, I don't know if I said it last week, but he rated out so well, and I just for some reason didn't go him. Oh, not for some reason, because I went Brendan Steele, who I was gonna talk about today, but fuck that guy. Alright, not actually. Brendan Steele is really good at driving the ball. 9th in strokes gained off the tee, hits it really well. He just didn't hit it well last week. So can't actually hold a grudge against a guy for having an off week, but I did like Wise last week, and I did pass on him because Brendan Steele was cheap. But Wise is, before last week, he had missed 5 straight cuts. And last week there was no cut. But he would have if there was. He played well enough Thursday, Friday. And his stats are good across the board. He's a solid player. He's a bad scrambler, though. Bad scrambler. Can't avoid bogeys well, which is weird for a guy who can putt as well as he can. But he makes birdies. So, I'm not gonna build your team for you. I'm just trying to throw the most information possible at you and let you get to the conclusion that you think is best. Henley at 6,700. He was right in there at the U.S. Open. Where is the guy I wanted to talk about? Oh, there he is. I think the last 2 names I'm going to say. First is Thorbjorn Olesen. He has been extremely hot, and he played really well last week, and he has done well. He's just, I don't have stats to back it up, but he is a guy that I think can play well versus tough fields. He's proven that, and I think he has the game for a PGA Championship, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him near the top of the leaderboard on the weekend. And then finally, I mentioned Steele. Austin Cook is a really good short game guy. doesn't hit it really well, and he can get a little. I mean, when it's bad, but he does have the chops to hang in there in tough conditions with his short game. But finally, I want to mention JJ Spawn. There he is. He is just a crazy good ball striker across the board. Just crazy good. And he reminds me of Hadley and DeChambeau in the sense of hasn't proven that he can do it in tough fields. It wouldn't shock me at all to see him just miss the cut by 8 strokes. But if you have a team that you really like a number of expensive guys and you just need to take a flyer, he is the flyer I would take. And you're gonna see it in a second. It's not just like he's like, oh, he's nice for like a mid 6Ks guy. Like, if this was a softer course where he has played really, really well, I would say he was underpriced by like 1,000. I do think he's underpriced here, but I'm not sure by how much. My point is, though, if you are looking for a guy to help you have a team full of expensive guys, there are options, and Spawn is one of them. I'm going to finish this off with just showing you what the formula list looks like so you guys can just get a glance. This has been weird because I have zeros, so I'm going to have to scroll down. But as you can see, Dustin, Rose, Thomas, the usual characters. I don't think the total number of the formula matters if you're wondering why I scrolled over, because it's just a meaningless number. It's just, how I, but it is sorted by it right now, so that's what you need to know. So yeah, we've got the elite guys. You see Casey is 8th, despite being 8,000. You see DeChambeau. Just going to skip over Griot. Finau, I didn't mention him. Phil, there he is. Luke List, Webb, Ryan Moore, Hadley. I didn't mention Howell. I didn't mention Zach. Zach's a guy who definitely can play well in a tough field. Kevin Na is a great scrambler. So if you're really, if you believe in the toughness of these bunkers and believe in the thickness of the rough is going to drive people mad around the greens, Kevin Na might be someone that you could take a flyer on just because his short game can get him to the weekend. I mean, Kevin Na's not going to win. They're not going to, give the PGA Championship trophy to a guy who wears a ridiculous visor like that. All right, I need to lay off Kevin Na. And there's Spawn. And that is the field this week. I mean, we keep scrolling. You're going to see how these guys rate out. I kind of liked Horschel. Horschel's putts well, and he's really accurate off the tee. So there's another guy if you wanted a sub-7 guy. But we are coming up on 40 minutes for this video, so I think I'm going to call it as I continuously scroll through my formula rankings. Thank you, as usual, to anyone who listened and watched the video. I know I'm still a little green. I've never really done this before, but I do appreciate anyone who made it through the whole thing. If anyone has any requests, you can tweet at me, or you can leave a comment in the section. I'd appreciate anyone who subscribed or followed me on Twitter. Subscribe to this channel. And yeah, I have been asked by a few people to release like this page and make it public, and I'm willing to do that if it gets enough traction. So leave a comment, or like I said, follow me on Twitter and tweet at me, and I'll do what I can. All right. Well, good luck to everyone who decides to jump in there this week, and I will see you all next week.